Yes,
Yep.
I think we are live. So
Yeah,
I'll start. We are live, so I'll start our introduction and then I'll come to you in the studio. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to all our viewers from all your respective area where you are joining us today. I am Nyanthon Hothmai, one of the moderators for South Sudanese Women Intellectual Forum, a researcher in the area of climate change and energy at the SAD Institute, a founder of Enjoy Your Space, a social media platform where I share tips on how to create systems that allow us young women to maintain our family at the same time without compromising our careers, dreams, and health. I am pleased and honored to be your moderator today. Our topic of discussion today is about water resource management in South Sudan. And in particular, we're going to look at the case of Jonglei Canal. When we talk of water, fresh water resource for any country is a blessing, but it can also be a curse if it is not well controlled, managed, and fairly distributed among the people. South Sudan is blessed with substantial amount of fresh water that is precious, more than our oil that we currently depend on. 20% of the surface of South Sudan is covered with fresh resources water. If well managed and fairly distributed, this could provide resources for sustainable social economic development, energy and food production, and healthy ecosystem for the people of South Sudan. However, if the water is mismanaged, it could be a source of violence and conflict, a source of natural disaster, in particular flooding. And we have all seen in the last 3 years, we have witnessed the destructive power of flood in which over 1 million of South Sudanese were affected. Amid the flooding in this country, the Jonglei Canal project has resurfaced once again, this time for a different objective. Jonglei Canal is being considered as a possible option for flood management mechanism. The question is, was Jonglei Canal developed historically to also control flood waters and to redistribute water resources among South Sudanese communities in the country? Also, the project has resurfaced at a time where context has changed. South Sudan is no longer on a menu where issues are being discussed and decisions are made on our behalf. We are on the table looking at the menu to find out what are the best effective flood prevention and management option that is sustainable and bring a maximum return to the people of South Sudan. On this discussion, we will hear presentation from the Undersecretary from the Ministry of Water and Resource and Irrigation. We will hear reaction from our panelists in this, uh, who are with me here in the studio on the Undersecretary presentation. After that, we'll shift to a discussion where all our guests and experts in the studio will discuss this question. Do we really need in South Sudan the Jonglei Canal project, either now or ever in South Sudan? If yes or no, what will we do with the current part of the Jonglei Canal that has already been dug? These are some of the issues our panels will be able to discuss here in the studio. And before I move to our guests in the studio, for those of you who will not be with us until the end of our discussion, I would like to put forth to you that we will have, because of the interest this project has generated, we have decided to hold more series of this discussion in the upcoming week. So please do follow the page so that you are updated when more discussion are coming here. So let me go back now to the studio and introduce to you our experts and panelists here who will be discussing this topic. As I've said before here, we have Honorable Emmanuel Ladu Pamanasa. Emmanuel is currently the Undersecretary for the Water Resources and Irrigation. Emmanuel has a basic degree in geology and mining in 1996 from the University of Juba, and a master's degree in urban water supply and sanitation from France in 2014. After signing of CPA in 2005, he joined then the Government of National Unity as a Director of Operation and Maintenance in the Ministry of Cooperatives and Rural Development, the Directorate of Rural Water Supply and Sanitation. The Directorate of Rural Water Supply and Sanitation was obligated into the Ministry of Water Resource and Irrigation, where he was assigned to lead the Directorate of Planning and Program before his appointment as Undersecretary in the same ministry. Emmanuel is conscious about the environment and ecosystem in this country. He is agenda conscious during his work as a project manager and Directorate of General for Planning. The Undersecretary of the Environment and Forestry is yet to join us. So I'll continue to introduce the rest of the panelists while we're waiting for him. Our next expert in the studio, we have here Professor John Akech. He is currently the Vice Chancellor at the University of Juba since 2014. He holds a bachelor's degree in system engineering from University of Wales and a PhD in manufacturing and mechanical engineering from Birmingham in the UK. He chairs the board of directors of South Sudan National Communication Authority and a board of trustee of South Sudan Philosophical Society. He is currently working towards completing a master's degree in economics, and he has a research interest in higher education innovation. Next, we have Professor Tag Al-Khazin. Professor is a Canadian citizen. He holds a bachelor's degree in engineering and master's degree in engineering from University of Washington, Seattle in the USA. He has 50 years experience in water resources and water management, development, conflict management, governance in the Horn of Africa, with a considerable expertise and engagement in South Sudan between 1972 and 2019. He is a retired professor from the Institute of Africa Studies of Carleton University in Canada, a senior fellow of the Norman Paterson School of International Affairs at Carleton. Between 1977 and 1983, Professor Al-Khazin studied then the 80 Hafirs of Western Upper Nile region and surveyed and designed 30 near Hafirs in location of higher density of animal and human population in both Western and Eastern Upper Nile region. Next, we have Mr. Niall Tidmamer. Niall is currently the Director of Environmental and Natural Resource Program at the SUD Institute and a part-time lecturer at the University of Juba. Before joining the SUD Institute in 2013, Niall spent research and consulting staying at Environment Consulting in Calgary and at the University of Alberta in Canada. Niall holds a bachelor degree in environmental study with a minor in English literature from the University of Alberta and master's degree in sustainable energy development from the University of Calgary in Alberta. Niall is the co-founder of the NewSudanVision.com and has extensive commented and written on issues about South Sudan and Sudan. Lastly, but not least, we have here Mr. Deng Majok Chol. Deng has a bachelor degree in political science and economics from Arizona State, 2-year MBA from George Washington University, and 2-year MPA from Harvard University. He is a student research assistant in the Abdul Latif Jamal Water and Food System Laboratory at Massachusetts Institute of Technology. He is also a researcher for the United Nations Office for Project Service in partnership with Oxford University. He is currently a DPhil or a PhD candidate at the Oxford University School of Geography and Environment, pursuing research on the social hydrology of South Sudan under climate and socio-economic change. His title of research is South Sudan Lungs, as sustaining the suit under climate and socio-economic change. I will go ahead and introduce the Undersecretary for Environment and Forestry while we wait for him, in case if he joins us in the middle of our discussion. So the Undersecretary to join us is Honorable Joseph Africano Batel. He is currently the Undersecretary of the Ministry of Environment and Forestry. Previously, he was the Director General at Directorate of Climate Change and Meteorology. He worked for several years at United Nations Environment Program for 5 years as a program coordinator and officer. Patel has Honorable Batel has a master's degree in forestry from University of British Columbia and Bachelor of Science in Forestry Management from University of Juba. I'd like to welcome you all, our experts, and our government representative here in the studio. And so I'd like to say hi to you. Before we jump into the Undersecretary straight to introduce to do the presentation, I would like you to take at least 1 minute or two to tell us what are part of your work you've done in regards to the SAD, into the SAD or to the Jonglei Canal in particular. I'll start with you, Professor Takal Kazin, just a little bit of the part of your work on the Jonglei Canal or just Nile water in general, and then we'll go to the next panelist.
Right, my engagement with the Nile water dates back to 1972. I spent quite a bit of my time in Ethiopia. I visited Ethiopia over 50 times, 50. A good number of those were under the USAID or other donors relating to general water supply, especially in the south, where the Baro River comes from as well. In Sudan, I built a massive library of documentation and maps that date back to 1923. I have the entire record in black and white or electronically in my archives and in the library behind me. Regarding the Sudan Jonglei Canal, I followed Jonglei Canal since inception of the design in the late 70s, and then the construction during the first years of the 80s. But I was a go-between with the late Dr. Justin Yaj when the SPLA kidnapped 5 French workers from the site when they disabled the machine, and the SPLA insisted on getting all the Caterpillar equipment in return for releasing them, and everything went smooth, and those machines went to the SPLA. That was a direct thing, and I will stop there. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll go to you, Honorable Emmanuel. I'll go to you and then follow by Professor Jonah Cage and Deng and then Niall in that order.
Okay, thank you, moderator, for giving me this opportunity. I think I don't have any direct link with the Jonglei Canal project. When the canal was initiated in 1976, I was still in intermediate secondary school. I was hearing stories here and there, and I felt the pain that the people of South Sudan underwent when they were protesting against this project, which was introduced to the people of South Sudan from the governments in Khartoum and the subsequent government in Egypt. I bear the pain for those who had been imprisoned, those even who lost their lives. I send my condolences to their families. I have seen the canal during the years when I was working in the ministry in the Directorate of Planning. When I went to the areas of Duke, we crossed the canal and we found that big hole hanging there. Its repercussions and ramifications after it was constructed is like something that was meant to drain water from the Republic of South Sudan. As I looked into documentation here and there, I found that the gradient and the slope of the canal was actually because the gradient was 1 to 3, as it is written in the record. So I felt that area, but actually to accelerate flow of water northwards. And sitting here on this desk, I think I would like I have second thoughts of the importance of this canal to the people and the livelihoods of the people of this country. I will speak more when I'll be making a presentation specifically about the canal. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Professor Cage, 1 minute or two, just quickly, and so that we can move to our presentation and discussion.
You are
Um,
muted.
you're muted.
You are
Yeah,
muted. Yeah.
Mm.
thank you very much. My connection with Jonglei Canal is I was one of demonstrators around 74. The project was, according to what we understood, it was to drain, I get rid of what they call loss to evaporation, 10 million cubic meter of water, which is said to be lost in through evaporation, and so Egypt wanted to benefit from that by creating a bypass, attempt, so that much of the water is channeled directly into the Nile. And I understood. Uh, I come also from regions in the Toch area, Gorial East. We have very big part of the Toch. It really appealed to me, and I demonstrated. Now, I went to university. I did applied physics and electronics, and then did systems engineering and mechanical engineering. I got exposed also. I did at Manchester University a postgraduate certificate in environmental innovation, focusing on environmental impact assessment. It was my interest as engineer in sustainability. I quite understand a bit about water cycle, carbon cycle, and hydrological systems as a scientist. And it really makes sense to me, and a sense of ridicule. If you think that 10 billion cubic meter is lost to evaporation, and it doesn't say anything about the effect on the hydrological cycle, that this water is never lost.
Yeah.
I want to understand here. I want to stop here. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, good morning, everyone. My initial interest in the salt water resources, as well as the Bahar Khazar sub-river system and the Bahr Koba Sobat, began about in 2008 when I attended the second SPLM convention in Juba, representing South Sudanese in diaspora. So I did a research and have a written paper that I shared with the top leadership of the SPLM. And I hinted to the importance of the Nile water resources. We also took in 2009 a trip back to South Sudan. And during that trip, I managed to go along the Nile in Juba and also in Jonglei in Bor, and realized that there has been tremendous pollution into the Nile. And then later on, when I worked for the World Bank, we hosted international engagement of South Sudan. This was partly funded by the World Bank when I was at the World Bank at the time and the USAID. I was asked to prepare a paper, what was called to be the guide. These were the material distributed to the attendant. And in that research, I also realized that the issue of Jonglei Canal was also something that the Egyptian may pursue to have it resumed. And so when I was at Harvard University, I took a course on water resources. And one of the rivers that were covered was the Nile, in addition to Mississippi, Okavango, Zambezi. All of these rivers were covered in that course. And I took a special interest in the such and did a paper. That paper became a bridge for me to apply to Oxford University, and we're doing a research now on South Sudan Nile waters. At the personal level, as far as Jonglei,
Mhm.
I had Honorable Lupai mentioning his experience in Duke. I come from Duke, and as a young boy, heading cattle at the time, I got to see this gigantic machine making its way through the villages, cutting some of the villages to the right and some to the left, so that how it came to Duke, both Duke Payuel and Duke Padiat villages are split apart, some to the western bank and some to the eastern bank of the Jonglei.
Yeah.
That is my personal experience as a young boy. So I am so happy to be here today and honored to be sharing the platform with all of you and be talking about this important matter. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Mr. Nial?
Thank you very much. You know, as my interest in the Jonglei Canal actually started when I became a student of environmental studies at the University of Alberta. And of course, as a student of environmental studies, you know, the ecological sensitive areas of South Sudan were, you know, my first interest as a student. But then when I came back to South Sudan in 2013, and I joined the SAT Institute. SUT Institute is basically named after the SUT wetlands, basically. And the part of it was actually to raise because this is the natural treasure of South Sudan. And since then, I have been the director of the Environment and Natural Resource Program there. And my research basically has been focusing on the climate change, the flooding, and the issues surrounding the Nile water and the ecosystem in general. And in particular, I've actually been involved in the, you know, track 2 diplomacy on the Nile water since 2014, organized by the ENTRO, which is the Eastern Nile Regional Technical Office, Eastern Nile Technical Regional Office, which is based actually in Addis Ababa. And so we have been involved since 2014, actually between 2014 and 2018. We've been involved in such discussions with Ethiopia mostly, and Sudan and South Sudan, where actually we have been involved in on issues to do with the management, equitable sharing of the Nile water, which means you know, using the water equitably by countries, cooperation, and the principle of peaceful coexistence by all the countries in the Nile Basin. You know, equality among all the member states. These are some of the, you know, this is how I got involved and be interested, of course, as an environmentalist, you know, protecting an ecological significant area like the Sud wetland, of course, has been one of my professional goals. Thank you very much.
Thank you all. And I think it's very clear that we have all the personal or interest or expertise and experience in what we are about to discuss today. So while we are preparing for the presentation from the Undersecretary, Aisha, if you can prepare his presentation, I would like to welcome our audience where you are joining us from. I would like to welcome you as well. Please be part of the conversation. If you have any question, please type your questions in the chat. And also if you want to add and comment, we have somebody who will be collecting the questions, and we'll have a session after the discussion where the experts here will address some of your questions. So we want you to be part of our conversation today. So to you, the Undersecretary, the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to make my presentation. I think let's move straight to the second slide where I introduce the outline of the presentation. The presentation will definitely focus about the institutional arrangement so that we understand what is, outline of presentation. I think it's not there. I'll walk you through an introduction so that we understand what is the Ministry of Water Resources and Irrigation. Then we look at climate change and global warming. Then we look at causes of flooding in the Republic of South Sudan, and these causes are classified as natural and anthropometric or man-made. Then thereafter, we look at effects and impact of flooding, just a few slides. Then we will look at the possible outcomes of inaction or inactivity by the Ministry of Water Resources and Irrigation or the Republic of South Sudan to address issues of flooding in the country. And then we conclude by presentation on the recommended courses of action. This is the first part when we shall be talking about water resource management. The second part will follow thereafter. So as a way of introduction, the Ministry of Water Resources and Irrigation came into being in 2005. It was never there in the previous governments except for rudimentary units like the Directorate of Rural Water Supply and Sanitation, which was by then embedded under the Ministry of Cooperatives and Rural Development. Those were the few assets that we inherited when we became a ministry in the Republic of South Sudan during the transitional period. We never had any infrastructure that we inherited apart from the Jonglei Canal and some of the projects which they used to call as Real Masri. Those projects were later on handed over to the Ministry of Water Resources and Irrigation during the 5th Governors Forum, which was held here in Juba, that any project which is called Real Masri should now be by default an asset of the Ministry of Water Resources and Irrigation. And these are the few things that we inherited from the previous governments. After that, knowing that we really lacked capacities, even at the state level, with the funding from the Multi-Donor Trust Fund, we were able to construct 9 units for the Directorates of Water and Sanitation in 9 out of the 10 states, except Unity State. We are able to equip those directorates with water quality units, laboratories, and the database basis. We even provided vehicles and motorcycles up to the county level in order for us to be able to manage operations and maintenance of water supply services in the country. As a way of mandate, because in the previous discussions, people were saying, what is the mandate of the ministry? What are we here for? So I think it's important that we underscore this so that when we shall be discussing, we know that the Ministry of Water Resources and Irrigation, can we go to the next slide? The ministry's mandate. I think you're presenting a different slide there. I wish you had portrayed the slide which I emailed to you recently.
I think
because
maybe
in the presentation which is in front of me after institutional, yes.
Yeah. So I think just continue.
After
Maybe speak to us from what you have.
institutional arrangement, yes. Okay, then we look at the ministry's mandate. The mandate of the ministry is to ensure provision of safe drinking water, improved sanitation services, safeguard and conserve freshwater systems, carry out and supervise hydrological studies, flood control works, irrigation infrastructure, and water storage facilities, including creation of dams. Our vision is sustainable harnessing and accountable management of water resources that respond to water-related people of South Sudan in an equitable manner. Our mission is therefore
Can you hear
to
us,
draw up
Undersecretary?
for water
Okay.
utilization, provision, and
Okay, so I think we're having technical problem there. So while we are waiting, I'll continue to tell our audience, please share this discussion as much as you can so that we can, so that other people who are interested in this discussion can join us. So yeah, Undersecretary, if you can hear us, please continue.
yes, I can hear you. The
Okay.
next slide is about the evolution of the wash sector. Yes. In the wash sector, we discovered that, as I said earlier, we lack the water policies, guidelines, regulations, and standards and strategies and investment plans. So from 2006, when the ministry was created, we had our first water policy, which was developed in 2007. Having had that water policy, it was developed during the then government of Southern Sudan, not now as an independent government of South Sudan. Therefore, it means that there's need. We developed the WASH strategic framework. WASH stands for Water, Sanitation, and Hygiene. This is WASH strategic framework was developed in 2011, and between 2012 and 2013, we came up with a number of documents these are urban and rural wash action and investment plans, so that we're able to see what kind of actions we need to do as a country. And in 2015, we concluded our first draft water bill, which was submitted to Parliament. But right now, as we speak, this bill has been recalled, as is required by the Transitional Government of National Unity, that most of, or even all these policies have to be revised and take into consideration aspects of the RRGs. The slide here, I think we are going to look at climate change and global warming. Here, South Sudan, as we know, is endowed with vast reserves of freshwater resources, but this freshwater resources is not evenly distributed and is not available at all times during the year. During dry season, you see some areas lack water, and during wet season, most of our plains in the Republic of South Sudan are flooded. And this causes conflict because during dry season, our communities have to move long distances in search of water and grazing areas for their livestock. And in the process of this movement, they expose themselves into cattle raiding risks. These water reserves occupy, as said by Mai, that it occupies 20% of the surface area of the Republic of South Sudan. But climate change-induced flooding has become a major threat to the lives and the livelihoods, property, and dignified living conditions of large numbers of the people in the Republic of South Sudan. During the last 3 years, 2019, 2020, and 2021 alone, over 1 million people each year have been displaced by floods in large parts of the country. This phenomenon of flooding is a manifestation of the 2019 Global Climate Risk Index mapping, which puts South Sudan number 8 on the global rich list of countries that are most affected by impacts of climate-related extreme weather events. And this situation is predicted to get a lot more worse. This is not the first time, but it's expected to get a lot more worse. Temperatures in South Sudan have been warming by 0.53 degrees Celsius per decade, with an average temperature rise of 1 degree Celsius since the year 1980 up to now. This temperature increase has led to significant shift in distribution of precipitation in the country, resulting into drier periods leading to outright drought and shorter wet periods with heavy rainfall leading to flooding. Therefore, this will lead to severe impact on the settlements, service provision, major livelihoods of the local population in the country. And there is urgent call for the government and the people of South Sudan to help communities cope with current challenges and build resilience against future threats. This is one aspect that the Minister of Water Resources has been challenged to address. Occurrences of flooding, as we can see in this flood here, in this graph, started picking up from 1960s. The pattern of flooding and drought from 1960s started picking up, and the curve goes up continuously. I spoke with one elder. He told me that in the 1930s or 40s, they used to cross parts of the Nile into the western bank from east to the western bank, and communities from western bank to the east were able to come closer to the Nile to graze. But as we speak now, most of these grazing areas have been filled, and this starts from 1950s. This is what this elder told me. When we look at this graph here, exactly it consists to what he says. And the assumption
I think we have lost the undersecretary.
we have in the ministry is here, the Aulia Dam in 1937. Then in 1940,
Yeah, we are having technical problem from Juba. Would like your viewers to be patient with us a bit so that we can go through the presentation. So Undersecretary is off now. Okay, he's back, and now the presentation is back as well. So we'll continue. Undersecretary, if you can hear us, just as well.
as per slide.
Okay, can you hear? And then as well, we'll want to actually really hear as well on
Can
the
you take us to
Jonglei
slide number
Canal.
9?
Yes.
Or 8 rather, where we stopped?
8, yeah? Number 8.
No, we move forward.
You can move forward
Move
to 8.
forward.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Continue, right?
This is bullet number 5. Heading number 5. Yep. Okay, this is where we are.
Yes.
So heavy downpour from the Ethiopia, from the Equatorial Great Lakes region is one of the causes of flooding. And also the shape of the Republic of South Sudan means within the South wetland, there's a very big depression where almost all our waters converge. And when this big pan, which is called the Lake No, overtops the banks, therefore it causes flooding. In the next slide, also we look at causes of flooding, which are natural causes, is due to vegetation overgrowth, yes. The vegetation has blocked most of the rivers in the country, narrowing the width of flow, and even the depths have been silted by sediments, and generally, the conveyance capacity of the rivers have been diminished or have been decreased, leaving the water to cause unnecessary flooding at all times. We move to the next slide. Causes of flooding also can be attributed to anthropometric, which is related to human activity. We can see here road construction has blocked water into one part and caused flooding in the other area because conduits and culverts, conduits for water flows between one part of the road has not been properly constructed. Also, waste management is another factor which blocks rivers and waterways and causes flooding. The other factor is also deforestation, where during agriculture activities,
Can you hear us, Under Secretary? I think we are. I think we've lost him again. I don't know if while we're waiting for him, if we could maybe start the discussion while we're waiting for Undersecretary, and maybe part of what he will present, we might ask in our discussion. So since the internet is unstable, I would like to actually come to you, the guest in the studio, and just go on to, because part of what we wanted to react to the Undersecretary presentation, and we wanted to see how this link to the Jonglei Canal. Now he's talking about the flooding, yes, but how did the case of Jonglei Canal resurface after this? So it's something we would really want to hear from the Undersecretary so that we can react to his presentation. But since the internet is not on our side, I would like to just give the guests in the studio, if anybody just wants to comment or say something while we're waiting for the Undersecretary to complete his presentation, because what he's going to say about the Jonglei Canal is very important for our discussion today.
Well, what I did is that I have actually downloaded the entire presentation, and as he was talking, I was following it up in another computer, in another laptop. And then I printed out all the comments that I intended to say in my 5 minutes as and when it was given to me. Uh, the issue of water and the issue of Jonglei Canal needs a comprehensive and all of government approach. Jonglei Canal was started as a colonial concept, and it remains today a colonial concept. You cannot actually design a structure of a home or a hotel and then take the same documents to build the road. You just cannot do that. So the design that was done in the 70s, upon which the canal was dug in 81, 82, 83, before the SPLA disabled the Rupel machine, that had one sole purpose. That's to drain water between 4 billion cubic meters to 10 billion cubic meters from the wetlands into the main Nile, into Egypt. And going back to the 1959 agreement, the agreement does not only share the waters of the Nile 100% between Egypt and Sudan. It goes on to say that any additional water that shall be salvaged from the tributaries of the Nile.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yeah, now we can hear you. Okay, I will stop. Go ahead.
Go ahead. Oh, we've lost him again.
So it was not only the running water, but any additional water like what will come out is to be shared between the two of them. However, one major comment on the presentation, as I have it and we all had it, is that there is no mention, not even one word or one line, about the Nile Basin Initiative and the Framework Cooperative Agreement. That's a shame. That's a shame. There are 5 countries that have signed on, 4 countries have ratified. If we get another country to sign on and 2 other countries to ratify, the Cooperative Framework Agreement with Article 14B will come into force. And the position of Egypt is going to weaken a great deal. There are 2 dimensions that I will mention very quickly. The one dimension is the women lens. Just off Kapoita, in a place called Nakromai, there was a borehole, and I monitored the girls who were standing to get water from 6 o'clock in the morning until 12 o'clock. For 6 hours, the girl that I noted was standing to get water. So if we want to deal with water, we have got to deal with the priorities, and we have got to have a women lens wherever we go. The women lens in South Sudan is extremely weak in every area, but water is a universal right, and I would like us to have a women's lens for whatever we are doing. The last thing that I would like to mention, it is not only environmental impact assessment. It's not only social impact assessment. It is peace and conflict impact assessment. It is livelihood impact assessment. It is the assessment of the collateral. If it were not for the Sud, we will not get the rains in Western Equatoria and Northern Uganda. So the study needs to be comprehensive, multidisciplinary, and it has got to cover all aspects with one objective and one proviso. Whatever is to be done has got to be in the primary interest of the people of South Sudan and not in the interest of any other nation or person. Thank you.
Thank you, Dan, Secretary. Thank you, Professor.
No.
Okay. You want to
Deng and then Liang? Okay.
Yeah. I'd like to echo. I'd like to echo Professor Kazim.
So let's start with Mr. Deng, and then we'll come to Niall. Right?
Oh,
and
yeah.
then Professor,
Sorry
I think Professor
about...
John Akage as well. You want to speak?
Okay. Good. And so what are we talking about here? So perhaps I should zoom out a little bit to join Professor Kazin in painting a bigger picture of the fragility and complexity of the issues we are talking about. So water security is what we are talking about in South Sudan. And we want to look at it from the vantage point of the fragility and complexity of the wetlands, not only in the Sat, but also in the Bahr el Ghazal, also in the Sobat river system, with Machar Marshes. All of these wetlands together form the ecosystem that we are talking about here. And we also want to look at the nexus of climate change, environment, and human security in South Sudan, because this may be one of the key challenges the country faces in the next several decades. Climate change, considering its volatility, is a multiplier factor that exacerbates violent intercommunal conflict, political instability, and poverty. So the holistic approach that Professor Kazin is talking about is in place. It is not an easy approach. It's not an easy solution. However, we cannot shy away from inventing the system. There are clearly huge gaps. I look at Honorable Lupai presentation. I have it in front of me here. From that presentation, as well as from what I know already within the institution of South Sudan, it is clear that we have huge gaps in institutional capacity. And there is a big difference here between institutional capacity and individual capacity. We have experts of South Sudanese outside the country and in the country. That's not where we have the deficit. Where we have the huge problem is the institutional capacity. We are talking of labs where we do the research, soil study. We are talking of equipment. We are talking about convening power, tools. We are also talking about the capability of technology and connectivity. An example is the case here. We cannot have Honorable Lupai online throughout this Zoom call because of poor network. All of these are what we mean by capacity in the context of institution. And so I had a great conversation with Ambassador Salwa Berberi, and we pointed out this issue. She has academy that she has been building, and it has helped in the area of capacity building, both from the women lenses that both Honorable Lupai and Professor Al-Kazin mentioned. And that has been very successful. Ambassador Salwa indicated to me that even today we have technocrats in the system of Kenya. Way as soon as Kenya got independent. And they are there to ensure that the technical know-how is in its place. It is important that South Sudan, to Al-Kazim point, connect with international system in the context of international law on water, in the context of all of these treaties that were signed during different periods. For example, there were treaties signed, number one, during the colonial era, that one period. We also had agreement and treaties signed when the independence of Africa country was obtained. I call that immediate post-colonial / neo-colonial era.
I'm sorry, can I catch you? So since the Secretary is back, could we maybe get him on quickly before he goes off again because of the internet? And then Undersecretary, if you could really zoom for us, we really want to hear as well your presentation on the Jonglei Canal, because it set the context of as well what our conversation is on today. So if you could fast forward, because the internet is a bit stable, so that we can start our discussion.
All right, that's fine.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, thank you. I think from here, going to talk about the possible outcomes of inaction by the ministry. Let's move forward to the next slide. Next slide, please. This is a problem statement. We all know that our systems are flooded. Okay, this is the situation that the Ministry of Water Resources is grappling with. that the already silted rivers and streams shall diminish their water carrying capacities if nothing is done about it, and should not be done haphazardly. It should be based on scientific studies. There will be possible drought during dry season if our rivers carrying capacities is diminished. Decrease in natural groundwater recharge potential if already our rivers are no longer carrying water, because our groundwater recharge potential may also be through the potential of our rivers to carry water. Accumulation of salts in some places as a result of diminished groundwater recharge, then the accumulation of salts will therefore increase in our groundwater aquifers. Based on the geographical location of the SAT wetland, most silts and sand dunes or construction debris, non-degradable biological matter or substances will definitely be deposited in the SAT wetland, because the rivers are already silted. Where do you expect this material to go? They will definitely and gradually go into the SAT wetland. And the SAT wetland might be silted up. I don't know for how long that will take, but it's an issue that scientists have to grapple with in case our rivers are silted and their carrying capacities are diminished. If this accumulation of siltation and sedimentation on the SAT wetland basin increases, then the volume of water contained in the system also decreases and diminishes. This is something that we don't want to happen. As the SAT wetland gets silted, more water ultimately leaves South Sudan. Then we have, one way or the other, caused water to leave South Sudan because we allowed the SAT wetland to be silted as a result of blockage of our rivers. As we lose water downstream due to diminished storage of the water system in the SAT wetland and in our rivers, then ecosystem and biodiversity in the Republic of South Sudan will be null and void. And we shall have the same effect. People are now crying that the Jonglei Canal will create desert. Also, this activity of siltation in our rivers and the SAT wetland will also create desertification in the Republic of South Sudan. But these are my wild thoughts. What should we do? We need to carry out comprehensive studies. We need to have a water resources master plan. And this now comes in the next slide, number 8, if you can move on, please. Now, the recommendation, if you don't want any one of those scenarios to happen, a recommendation from the ministry is that we need to carry out immediate environmental and social impact assessments of all the water channels and water courses in the Republic of South Sudan. But they must be carried out by professionals, people who have knowledge in stratigraphy. We need to involve paleontologists. We need to involve sedimentologists, limnologists, hydrologists, water economists, political scientists, so that we also look into aspects of conflict and socio-economic viability of our people in the Republic of South Sudan. When these studies are done, then it will inform us in the Ministry of Water Resources and Irrigation to develop our strategic water resources master plan. When we have a water resource master plan in place, then we'll come up with the possible costs of investment. Then we have the water resource investment plan. Thereafter, then we'll be looking for resources in order to carry out these activities. Let me move forward. Some of the recommendations are here also. That the next slide, please. Next slide. We can see in these pictures here, our water source is this lady collecting water, which is more or less polluted because the source of water is already underwater. Okay, the source of the drinking water is under the flat water. The kitchen is underwater. Food is being prepared underwater or on top of the surface of water. And the kitchen or the dining table is also underwater. The ministry need to create a functional water information management system. We need to establish a drought or flood early warning forecasting center. We're working on that right now. Development of extensive water resources management infrastructure, like dams and so on and so on. All those things need to be put in place once we have a water resources master plan. Improvement of water and sanitation supply services to safeguard our communities. This is another activity. And then we need to develop catchment management organizations, units, boards all over the country, so that we effectively and efficiently manage our water resources, even at the lowest level. Everybody must be involved to safeguard this precious natural resource in the country. The last slide here, if you can move forward, we can see that Mother Nature is very kind to give us some hints. When you look at the rivers truncating the neighborhood in this village, those are natural canals created by the rivers themselves. Why can't we create our natural canals in the country in order to store the water underground, below the surface of the land, instead of allowing the water to move on the surface? I think this is the first presentation which I'm concluding. We move forward to talk about Jonglei Canal, because this is really important. Are we there? We move to the next slide, please.
Yes.
We'll talk about the we'll talk about the genesis of Jonglei Canal. The equipment I put there is one instrument that can be used for canalization of the Republic of South Sudan, not for the purpose of other people, but for the benefit of our people. So the history of Jonglei Canal started way long time, and it was based on the interests of the British. Next slide. During that time, the undersecretary in Egypt came up with the plan in 1904, others said 1907, and presented this plan to the government of Egypt. The government of Egypt took their plan and also carried out their independent studies. Let's listen carefully. Egypt, after receiving this plan, they did their own independent studies, and they make a recommendation that they need to dig a canal, which is about 240 kilometers, to increase flow of water from Bahar al-Jebel into Sudan and then to Egypt in order to increase their cotton production in Egypt. This proposal by Sir Gassin in 1904-1907 was the genesis of the Jonglei Canal. Next slide. So in 1920, a Dutch company or specialist called Sir Murdoch MacDonald presented a plan of building the Sennar Dam and Jebel Olia Dam. These are some of the schemes they put up in place before even starting construction of Jebel Olia, of the canal, such that if too much water is leaving South Sudan, Khartoum will not be flooded, Omdurman will not be flooded, Kalakalad will not be flooded. They put up the massive Jebel Olia High Dam, which was the biggest during that time in 1937. In 1945, a research team was formed by the government of Sudan to study the available plans of the project. The Sudan did their own independent study after receiving tip from Egypt that they need to dig the Jonglei Canal. Sudan also did their own studies. In 1946, Egypt's Ministry of Works published a study under the title, The Future Conservation of the Nile. It is based on the interest, that is the future conservation of the Nile, but not based on the interest of the people of the Republic of South Sudan. To conserve it from what and from who? Next slide, please. In 1959, both Egypt and Sudan created the first Nile Agreement, where they split the water based on their interest without consulting countries upstream. Egypt-Sudan Joint Technical Commission was created as a result of that agreement, and the commission conducted a detailed study of this same project and presented to the governments of Sudan and Egypt in 1971. They're working together, they're doing the studies together, they're making their own agreements together, independent of other countries within the Nile Basin. The project was approved with some suggestions. Next slide, please. Approval of the Jonglei Canal. In 1974, the canal was Jonglei Canal was approved for digging. The Jonglei Canal project, however, faced some major opposition from the Southern Sudan right from the beginning. It's because the project was seen as to be serving the interests of Sudan and Egypt. The local and international civil society organizations also put up their voices and concern and said this project is detrimental to the South ecosystem, specifically on drinking water, pasture, fisheries, and access on either side of the communities. This and the wildlife will not be able to move if this canal is created. Objection to Jonglei Canal by the people of South Sudan. When the Sudanese listened to objections from the scientists and people of South Sudan, they decided to increase the length of the canal from 280 to 360 so that it does not take its intake from the south wetland but close to border. That one is not sufficient enough. According to them, digging of the canal was expected to save great amounts of water for them and free a lot of cultivable land that would have been submerged if this canal was not there. This according to them. Also, they say it will lead to development and some months to negative consequences of the project. That's according to them. After the temporary end of Sudan's civil war, following the conclusion of the Addis Ababa agreement, they came up also with this plan that they want to start this project. And they designed it. Next slide, please. Let's look at the position of South Sudanese. Some reasons why South Sudanese protested and closed the Jonglei Canal was that the ownership was perceived to be in the interest of Sudan and Egypt, as I said earlier. Southern Sudan was at war at that time, and they see Egypt as a supporter of Arabization and Islamization project of the Sudan. So if this project was allowed to go forward, Egypt will support Sudan militarily, and the SPLM movement will find it difficult to carry out their operations. So the project was stopped. Egyptian farmers were said also to be brought to South Sudan, about 3 million of them, and work in the area. That was a hidden agenda. It was not known to South Sudan, but I think there is no smoke without fire. Egypt will protect the canal with its military might. I've already said that. We move to the next slide. The South Sudan did not see the development agenda of the canal because it was not presented to them. At certain stage, Khartoum also started to fear that the canal, after it was constructed, might even flood Khartoum, even if Jebel Olia Dam is there. They fear that. And some fears also that the canal will drain the wetland and create loss of biodiversity. When we look at this map here, there have been some scenarios. The first one was way deep into north of Bor, but then when they increased the length of the canal to 360, it came to Bor town. There are suggestions by others that it might even, if we are to think of reviving this canal, the intake can be from north of Bor here, but we have not reached there. So what is, the next slide is, what is the position of the Ministry of Water Resources and Irrigation with regards to this project, with regards to this asset, which is imposed on us? We inherited this asset in the ministry. We need to do something about it. So our position is that the ministry and ultimately, possibly the government, needs to take time to study this project. Because this project was initiated in 1904. The first digging was done in 1978. That is about 74 years. They took time and put the required infrastructure in place. Why are we in a hurry? No, we are not in a hurry. We need to do the necessary studies as of now. But because the canal has been created, we are told that, I've not seen it personally, the northern ends of the canal have started, has burst its banks and it started discharging water, which are collected in the system into the Nile near Marakal. Some people are already using it for canoes. What are we going to do with this sudden discharge of water into the Nile? Our people are crying that they don't want our blood to flow into the north, but already it is flowing. What are we going to do about it? Therefore, we need to commission an immediate study to see the side effects and the ramifications of this project. If we need to put water flow locks, then we shall put the water flow locks. But that should be based on study. Also, the Minister of Water Resources and Irrigation need to come up with laws and policies to safeguard our natural resources. As I gave you the policy development of the Republic of South Sudan, they are not yet robust enough. We need to develop those laws. Also, we need to develop water resources investment plans, as I said, and then water resources management plans in our catchments, as I said earlier, and the ministry should have resource mobilization for water catchment areas. So I think this is the end of my presentation here. This is our position in the Ministry of Water Resources and Irrigation. Those who initiated this project took their time to study the benefits and side effects of this project, and they went ahead. Also, as an independent nation, we feel that we need to be empowered to carry out our independent and scientific research on this existing infrastructure, but we also have to look at other aspects which are contributing to flooding in the country. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, the Undersecretary. That was impressive presentation. And it's amazing how now we know the position of the ministry and the government at all. So the question here, before I go back to you, our expert in the studio, I know you have comments on his presentation. We have one question from one of the audience, and the question goes, let me read it. Please educate us why the government of South Sudan has brought up the Jonglei Canal back to the table at this point. Where did this debate that is coming, where is it coming from? Where was the genesis of it? So I think as our expert comment, put that in one of your, as a question that you can respond to later. So I'll, Mr. Deng, I'll go back to you so that you can finish your point quickly. So then we can move, was it Niall and then Professor? Okay, Professor Cage is back as well because you keep in one. So finish your thought.
Yeah, thank you. And thank you very much, the Undersecretary, Honorable Emmanuel Lupai, for that great presentation. I will comment on the overall water resources. I will also comment later at the different round on the Jonglei Canal. So I just want to complete my remarks on that. And so we are talking about the multiplicity of the rivers and the main channel here, which are the bodies of water composed of the Bahar Kazal, the Bahar Koba Sobat, and the Bahar Jebel. Each of these subsystems has multiplicity of streams, creeks, channels, and lakes. And it is important that the ministry is now recommending a comprehensive research on all the rivers because all of these form the ecosystem. Picture in your head human anatomy where we have the lungs and the bone. I tend to think that the Sat wetlands, not only the Sat wetland, but the Sat regions are the lungs that breathe into these rivers, which play the function of the bones and arteries of the human body. These wetlands have impacts on the rivers and the environment directly across the entire country, including the Green Belt regions. So the weight that Professor Al-Kazim is talking about provide a ecosystem that sustain human, fish, bird, wildlife, fauna, and flora. When natural catastrophe occurred, what happened? The affected population moved. Where do they move to? They move to the other region, and this bring in associated population that are also affected. So one of the things that the ministry can do, not in silos, but with other ministry, is to ensure that there is an interlink, multifaceted institution that manages not just the impacts on the environmentally IDPs, but also on the host community, and to work on the relationship there. Today, there is urgency for South Sudan government to have contemporary research, as you pointed out very well, Honorable Lupai, that all the research, the previous research, have been quite old. Some of them have, 5 decades, 2 decades. And so having the contemporary research is important, and that South Sudan need to have a repository of the current contemporary knowledge and evidence-based assessment. Why do South Sudan need to have that? For them to have policies that are developed based on evidence-based. And what is that policy going to do? It's going to create action plans on the components of the River Nile water resources. I also was on the point when you were coming in after you were cut off on the point of international laws. And I totally agree with you and Professor Kazim. Having South Sudan today engage internationally, and the kind of treaties and laws that we are talking about can be categorized into 4 main periods. First period, colonial era. Second period, immediate post-colonial era / neo-colonial era. 3, the CPA era, when South Sudan became an autonomous region. And then the last one is the independent era from 2011 to the present time. When we have these laws, given this period, it allows South Sudan to assert its rights and benefit, given how South Sudan trajectory as a country has been historically. And then the engagement with the affected population is one thing that we need to have in our research, inclusive and comprehensive study as to what their views and meaning of resiliency is, this affected population. Because policy makers can come up with what they think is resiliency to this affected population. But this affected population, including talking again about women's lands, women's are the one that bear the brunt of all of this. And so having really an intentionality in engaging the affected population is key. When I look at your, perhaps this is the comment I want to make from the presentation, and again, you acknowledge it. There is a lot of policy on the entire White Nile water resources that is anchored in the national interest of South Sudan, and that gets into the issues of rights and benefit. And I think we have to consider water here as a national security priority. The last point I want to make is about why now. And it goes a little bit to what Nyanton was mentioning, a question from the audience, but this is not about the canal. But why now is about why we need to do a comprehensive research and why South Sudan need to begin to observe a trajectory in its economic reform. It is based on the SAT. The SAT itself is the lungs. And if we are going to observe any transformation in economic growth, we ought to do something now. What we see going on is conflict in the country for many years. Conflicts have become jobs and careers for some people. We need to provide alternative, and the alternative is that there are jobs in the rivers.
Yeah.
For example, during early time in our ancient societies, fishermen used to tell when the season is changing, when the water rises and when the water is low. Those were early warning signs. We are not even capitalizing on those. I believe we should be able to reach out that Ministry of Water Resources and Irrigation create different agency and invited all these segments of society to be employed and to play a role in it. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Nyala, I'll quickly go to you and then Professor Kate. Professor Kate, is your medal good? Because you're in and out.
Okay, thank you very much to all of you colleagues. Thank you to Honorable Emmanuel for a very comprehensive presentation. Let me make a few comments on the presentation. First, let me say that Honorable Emmanuel, you have painted a very clear picture. There's no doubt about it. A very clear picture about the problem facing South Sudan with regards to water. Water is life, but water can also be death, because in the last 3 years we have seen what it is. So too much of it is death. Too little of it is death. But balancing it is life. And I think this is what we should be aiming at. So you have painted the clear picture, as I said. But then I was waiting for the same clear direction in terms of the solution to undergate, a proposal from you that the position of the ministry is to have a comprehensive study. But then my question was, comprehensive study on what? What I have seen in the presentation, because your presentation was shared earlier and I read it, what I saw was that you are mentioning Jonglei Canal, you are mentioning some of the dams upstream, Bidan, Fula, and other dams. But all these things that are being mentioned in the presentation are not being clearly connected. Whether they are part of the solution is not strongly coming out from the presentation. You know, I'm pointing these out because the main purpose of this platform is for us South Sudanese to be able to also help in terms of putting our input into what the ministry has already proposed. So to me, the solution is not clear, and the reason I'm saying that the solution is not clear is because we must have at least an indication of where we want to go, and then we study that. We have a number of options that we are supposed to study. To me, the studies, I agree with you, we need to do comprehensive study. This is the first step. And by the way, this stage is what we call, in environmental studies, we call this stage the assembling point, the assembling stage, where we assemble evidence before the politicians can come in and make the decision. So at this point, for us to be able to adequately assemble a good data, we must also be mindful of the fact that we need to also include all the aspects of the possible solution that we see out there. And if the Jonglei Canal is what the ministry is thinking is a possible solution, there are also other possible solutions that should also be studied and should be included. And these include, in my opinion, that we South Sudanese should also be thinking about the possibility of studying a storage dam upstream in Nimili. In fact, the Nimili area was identified in the studies, and those who have actually read the studies of the Equatorial Nile project and other studies before them and after would attest to this, that the expert actually identified Nimili as the best site for a storage dam because it has a rocky foundation where you can actually do a dam that will act as both for generating electricity and storing excess water, like the kind of that water that we saw in the last 3 years. And in your presentation, which I read, but I think you did not mention it because of the time pressure, you mentioned the flood level in South Sudan is 300 meters as measured from Juba, and I'm one of the people who have actually been closely following the good job that your ministry is doing in terms of collecting data at the Juba gauging station. And I know, yes, the flood level in Juba as measured here is 13 meters. But actually 13 meters is even way high. It's actually way high. So it's usually low-lying areas, you know, already will experience if it reaches 12.5 or 12.6. When it reaches 13 meters already, that's already red. That's too much already. But what I'm trying to say here is that if we were to build a dam upstream, we can actually contain, hold back water, so long as the water is not reaching the dangerous flood level of 13, which you mentioned, and we hold back the rest, and we flow, so we can use the water that we need to flow through the river for whatever purpose we want, for domestic consumption, for irrigation, for electricity generation, for ecosystem maintenance, especially the Sud wetland maintenance. So these options should be studied, and I think they should come out clearly as some of the options. Like if we can draw a lesson from the Equatorial Nile project, the studies which were commissioned in the 40s to do, to see the impacts of all these projects. You know, all the dams from Uganda, Kyoga Dam was proposed, Lake Albert Dam was proposed, Dam in Nimili was proposed, Bedan Dam was proposed in South Sudan, the 2 dams in South Sudan, and 3 dams in Uganda. All of them were actually made for the purpose of storing excess water, and then of course the diversion from the Sud well and using the Jonglei Canal. But of course, some of these actually were going to have drastic, impacts on the ecosystem and on the social system of South Sudan. But if we were to actually re-examine all these options from our own perspective, to readjust them to our need, like I said, need of protecting the ecosystem, needs of actually rejuvenating our economy. By the way, electricity is the engine of industrialization. And South Sudan, we actually need electricity. Electricity is a basic need for us. And so if we want to talk about development, we should start with building a dam in Nimili as the first priority, not Jonglei Canal. Because Jonglei Canal already, it's a serious matter already. And by the way, when I'm talking here, when we say we don't want the Jonglei Canal to be dug, what we are trying to say is that, and somebody will say, oh, let's do the study first. You don't do a study on something that you have already protected. The third wetland is a protected wetland already. That's why South Sudan has already acceded to the Ramsar Convention on the Wetland of international significance. Is because of significance of this wetland that we need to use it wisely and to protect it. So when we are actually draining it, what is going to come is that we are going to basically destroy it, and we are going against, and we are going to lose a huge value that is tied to this, which is was here. Based on the current assessment the ministry is doing, the truth wetlands actually is about $3 million US alone. When it's going to be a big loss to South Sudan. And based on the previous studies like John Sutcliffe, Ibn Parks, and others who have done the same thing recently, others who have done the study, they are showing the models that different models that will lead to a significant loss of the wetland that is going to be ecologically disastrous. Thank you very much. Let me give a chance to others.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Nian. I just want to remind our viewers that we're just commenting on the presentation of the Undersecretary, and then our second session, our time is going off because of the problem of the internet. So the next session, we're going to discuss the question, and that will be basically a debate. Do we really need the Jonglei Canal, either now or in the future? So we hope you continue to be with us. And now I'll go to you, Professor Jonglei, to give your remark. And then I'll go back to Professor Tak, because when you talked, the Undersecretary was not here. So if you could maybe add 1 or 2 points before we move to our next session. Thank you.
Thank you very much, moderator. Your question that why now? I think it's opportunistic. And I doubt whether Egypt is not behind this initiative. What I read about this initiative and what I watched the interview of the Honorable Minister of Water and Irrigation last night. He said he has submitted a concept note to the cluster. It's not clear whether, to infrastructure cluster, asking for resources for feasibility study to review, to look at the part of Jonglei Canal that has been dug as a solution. That maybe it is the cause of the flooding that is happening, because it is storing water and then distributing it, spilling over. So that the topology of the land might have changed. So he wants to find an answer to that. And possibly, from what I heard from him, it could be we are actually halfway between the earth and the sky. Why don't we finish it? He actually seemed to imply that. Why do we only have 70 miles? Why don't we finish it? He didn't say directly, but it is implied. So it is opportunistic. Now, the way reading their minds, they're saying this is the time now. We have flooding 3 years constantly. So let us actually jump on board and turn the problem into a solution for flooding. This is what I suspect the reason, and I suspect Egypt behind this. But also it brings in a possibility of stoking conflict. Between the politics itself, geopolitics, possibly trying to actually bring, we have our polarized politics. Somebody may actually buy into that, becoming an ally of sort. So I suspect that, some politicians might like to actually have allies, and Egypt is one of them. Egypt is dug down It's not only doing this, it's been doing illegal dredging of Bahr al-Jabal, Bahr al-Ghazal. And in fact, already we are getting report that ponds that used to have water no longer has water. And I'm sure Professor Al-Khazin is going to actually tell us about the effect of dredging. This is another thing that has not been mentioned. So I think, looking at this point, I think it is opportunistic, and it has other hidden agendas behind it. And Egypt is actually trying to exacerbate conflict, political conflict, social conflict. That is my suspicion. Now, the thing is, if we have to go along with this this logic, it assumes that floods are going to be like that forever. You know, floods are going to be like that forever. Is it true? Science, I'm sure, Professor Kazan will actually inform us. No, and there are many environmentalists here. The extreme floods happen every half a century, and we remember in the 60s when Bor was flooded and people actually left and so on. But over then the following decades, it's been dry, and people went back again and resettled in those flood plains. So the idea that this Jonglei Canal is a solution is really doesn't carry much water. Now, the Undersecretary, I want to thank you for your presentation. Now, if you jump from, you have a list of priorities. As a minister, you already have spoken about the policies, the water bill that has not been has not been passed, the policies that needed to be reviewed. You know, the institution that has no budget, you don't have money even to do anything. You cannot even provide water for the citizens of Juba, and so forth. Now, what logic is it? You know, you start a project that has the potential. You know, even somebody who is not environmentalist or not a water expert, if you are saying that you are going to have, you know, you want to benefit from the 10 billion cubic meters that is lost. Is it true that it is lost? You know, is it true it is not lost? That argument doesn't carry water. And what it means that if you take that 10 billion cubic meter of water, you are going to change hydrological cycle. You are, as we have already been explained, you are bound to have no rains in the Western Equatoria, Western Bahr Ghazal, Northern Uganda. This is something clear. You are taking this one. It is not free. It is not going to be free. So already we know that. So now, in your list of priorities, why do you start with the most contested project? And you don't even have the capacity to supply water. Now, Choldeng has, and I'm going to finish, has actually spoken about weak institutions that we have. And it's clear we cannot even have coherent policies, we cannot pass laws, and the governance, the planning process is fragmented. It's not everybody come up with a project. You know, what are our priorities as a country? At the moment is night, and it is not a good time to actually try to implement projects that are as contentious and dangerous as Jonglei Canal with these weak institutions. You don't have the budget to do anything. And when you are going to ask for feasibility studies, you don't even have the money. So I would say that our priorities would be to build a strong civil service and to actually rebuild our economy. Our economy is in tatters, and that has impact on everything that we want to do. Whether you want to do feasibility studies, whether you want to supply water for the people in Juba and surrounding areas, and we have to have laws before we embark on that. We need to, if not, I am saying that let this project stay on the shelves as it is. It was one of the reasons that, you know, South Sudan went to war. Islamic law was one. The abrogation of the Addis Ababa Agreement was one. The third one, or was it the second on the list, was the digging of Jonglei Canal, which has, you know, potential of draining the Sat and changing the livelihood and affecting the hydrological cycle of the basin. So from this point of view, I think Ministry of Water and Irrigation really is just jumping into a bus which it shouldn't, and the priorities have not been laid. You don't have the budgets even to do the basics one. You talk about silting of and the waste. We are not able even to collect the waste. A Kenyan company has been asked to collect the waste for us. I mean, this is not the conditions. This is not the time to really think about this contentious project when you have other project priority. The flooding system. When you really have the flood, you don't take the most contentious problems as a solution. You really have to think about other options. You need to resettle population. If you take an airplane, you find empty places. Now, do you insist that people need to live in that area if it happens that the environment has changed and they cannot live? When we have so many lands to actually area to settle them, those are the questions you need to consider. So you really have to look at the simplest solutions before you look at the most complex solutions. So that is for you as a ministry. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Professor Chonakate. I'll go to you, Professor Tag, if you have one or two comments on the presentation.
Yes, the first comment is organizational. I think we have just scratched the surface, and I think time was not available for our viewers to ask their questions, and we need to do them due respect. So I like the idea of having another session. When you are organizing the next session, we need to probably talk about what do we mean by water politics, what do we mean by water policies, what do we mean by clearing rivers, dredging rivers, draining rivers. Those are three different orders that we need to be careful about. I will go, my comments, I have two comments. Number one is slide number 17. I am talking about the serial number that starts with possible outcomes of inaction by the ministry. And Emmanuel has listed 9 of them. I think they are all valid, but I think they all need research, even to put the terms of reference. Out of this session and the future sessions, I think we need to have one objective, and that is to support Emmanuel, to support the ministry, to support the legislative, and to support the executive. So those 9 bullets that you have enumerated are actually very well thought through. And I think they will form the basis for terms of reference for at least the initial research. When you have got such a load of issues, probably a pre-feasibility rather than a full feasibility, so that we have better clarity. And then I will go to your very well listed position of the water Ministry of Water Resources on Jonglei, and that's slide number 31, serial 31, that starts with there needs time to study this project. This is critical. I think this is the summary. Those are 7 bullets. Your 7 bullets actually are the gate, are the entry point to what we all aspire to see, and that's a comprehensive and scientific water policy strategy for South Sudan. However, this is way beyond an event like this. This is way beyond the minister and the undersecretary and the entire ministry. This calls for a national conference to come out with all those from a wider national base. There is need for what I call intellectual input, and that normally comes from universities. So probably having an institutional team of the ministry with the University of Juba, other universities, and then we can together look for some funding and go for probably 3 days of a national conference so that we can dialogue, we can share ideas, we can share concepts, and we come out with a framework for a master plan for South Sudan. Thank you very much, and thank you very much, Nisan, for managing this and for inviting us.
Thank you so much. So I think I will ask permission from all of you, our expert in the studio. We were supposed to have our second session, which is about, do we really need the Jonglei Canal at this point, where you would present your argument, either you offer it against and what the recommendation. I think we've done some of this, but because of time and because we have other session we plan, we'll move this second session to our next presentation, our next discussion. But I think now, as you said, it's very important for us to answer some of the audience questions. And maybe we'll use this opportunity for the Undersecretary to answer some of the questions, or to respond to you, the comments you've said, and answer some of the questions. So, Undersecretary, as I said before, the people are asking, why now? Why is the issue of the Jonglei Canal coming up? And to answer that question, while I'll collect the other question, and then I'll come to you. But if you can respond to us, why now, and then respond to the other to the other questions.
Okay, thank you, moderator, and thank you, panelists, for that wealth of knowledge and different positions. Some of your positions are beyond my scope. I will not be able to answer, especially when we're talking and touching about political issues. My position here is to give facts and scientific evidence as to what needs to be done in the country with regards to comprehensive water resources management in the Republic of South Sudan. The question that the audience want to know and to be educated as to why we're talking about the Jonglei Canal now. I'm even trying to find answers as to why the Jonglei Canal is an issue now. Because in the introduction, I've been working in the Ministry of Water Resources and Irrigation. We never had this issue for a very, very long time. We never discussed about it. If it was spoken under closed doors, I never had heard about it. It's not that I'm in this position. I've been looking forward to having the Jonglei Canal. No, please. This is not my position individually. What happens is that we know discharges from our rivers is known, and we need to be able to carry out the studies and know what were the volumes of water leaving Malakal or Reng before the canal burst its banks, and what is the volume of water leaving Malakal at the point of Reng after the canal burst its banks. The question is just as simple as that. But for some other reasons, sometimes we tend to swing between political and scientific. I had spoken to one of the elders in this country that we need to carry out this study for some other reasons, just in case somebody will later on come into the country and say, you spoiled my digging rig, which is the only one in the whole world. And the value of this rig is this much. We need South Sudan to compensate us for this one. What is our fallback position? Nothing. We don't have any information. But if we carry out this study, I'm not saying it should be carried out tomorrow or the day after, we will be able to know the damage caused to our livelihoods as a result of this infrastructure. We documented how many livestock died, perished, how many families were separated as a result of creation of this infrastructure. What damage has it done on existing communities? Has it created political tension? Has it not created political tension? Have we lost human beings into this canal? How many of them? We get this information, we put it down. When someone later on in future comes, please compensate us for this equipment, we say, please, first, you have to compensate us for the biodiversity and the wildlife lost as a result of creation of this canal and the difficulty our people face, and so on and so on. This is one aspect. The other aspect is that, as we say, the canal has burst its banks. We need to study its positive and negative immediate impact on the communities. It's not that we want to say this evidence, now let us complete the project. No, it's not that one. Please, Professor, I beg you, this is not our position. and it will not be our position until otherwise we're informed. And that study is not going to be done by anybody in the ministry. It's going to be conducted by an independent entity. When that study is to be done, as I said, it's not immediate. My presentation said clearly that the Egyptians and the Sudanese took over 70 years to reach to the final conclusion that they now want to dig the canal. And in the ministry, I think also we need enough time to do whatever studies we want to do and take decisions as to what needs to be done. Mr. Deng Majakshol, I read one of your previous presentations. You had suggested that even when we need a canal, we might need this water to flow through Badingilo, Kapoita, Boma Park, the Lone areas there before it goes back to the Nile. It's something good. But do we have evidence? What will we cost and so on and so on? We need also to provide water to our cattle rearing communities west of the Nile, the Gogorial East, Tonj North, Tonj South, and some of those areas where our communities have conflicts during dry season due to lack of access of water resources. If we had the study will tell us, if we have the water resource master plan, we could even create parallel conduits away from the sad wetland, such that if the sad wetland is overwhelmed with water, this water can flow through these canals and reach somewhere within a channel, but not overflowing on the surface. And I cannot say this is the solution. It has to be based on scientific evidence. So about the issue of storage facilities, this is our proposition. We're saying even for us to create irrigation canals and schemes, we would like to have built storage facilities upstream and in some of our rivers, such that, as we know, these droughts are not going to be there forever. There'll come a period when we'll have little rains, less flooding, then we will be able to use our water reservoirs to ensure that water always flows to our irrigation schemes, water flows to our cattle rearing communities, to water their livestock, and so on and so on. The first priority is for us to have storage facilities. As well as Sudan did construction of Jebel Olia Dam to protect Khartoum from drowning, we need to build our dams to protect our people from flooding. I think this is the first priority if we were to have the resources. But Professor also said that we don't have resources, and so we are disempowered. But as a government is never poor. When we have the right plans and strategies in place, we will be able to mobilize resources. We will be able to convince someone that these are the ABCs which need to be done, and these ABCs are based on scientific assumptions, not on wild thoughts that the rivers are silting, we're going to have flooding, or we're going to have dry land, and so on and so on. No, these are wild thoughts which we are having in the ministry. But these wild thoughts should be based on scientific studies. About issue of communities and IDPs, what needs to be done, we should work together. We should work together with other entities. This one is beyond my scope. But to the best of my knowledge, what I know is that flooding never started today in the Republic of South Sudan. The communities had their own coping mechanisms and resilience in time past. They were able to settle amicably, and I've never read anywhere that there had been conflicts during those years. Why now? Someone has to provide those answers, not me, because I'm just a civil servant. Affected populations, and then the dams. Okay. On my side, as an individual, I even have suspicions that these studies which were carried out during the transitional period on the dams, the 4 dams or 5 dams from Nimule, Fula 1, Fula 2, Beden, Shukole, Laki, and then the Juba Barrage, which is near here. Those studies were done with the lens of someone else. They were done with the lens of someone who wanted to generate hydro energy. We, as a Ministry of Water Resources and Irrigation, we need to reconduct those studies and see what are the potentials of storage. Is it Nimule? We know very well that there's a very long reach. Hello?
Yeah, we hear you.
We can hear
Yes,
you.
there is a very,
Oh yeah, I
very
think
long and
Professor H.
extensive.
I think we need to mute ourselves because I think there's an echo from
Yes,
our end. Yeah.
yeah, a long ridge west of the Nile, starting from Kajukeji up to south of Juba here. The place which is a little bit lower is eastern plains of the Nile. But if we are robust enough to redesign the old studies conducted by SMEC, we might find that we need only 2 large capacity dams to store our water and generate hydro energy. This is on the Bahar Jebel. The other studies in Suez, multipurpose dam, Kineti, and other future dams are subject also to study. The one of Suez multipurpose dam, I for one went to Egypt and did the negotiation and said, we are not yet ready to, the data used for the study of Suez multipurpose dam is not sufficient enough. They provided scanty data. We need robust data going back up to 1920s. Egypt and Sudan were custodians of those data. They never provided the data, and they wanted to conclude a study not based on ample data. We said no. And probably our friends in Egypt know me, and that's why, to some extent, they're keeping me at arm's length. So let us go. For the political ramification of the Jonglei Canal, I'm not going to talk about that. And I think as of now, we need really peace to stabilize before we think of other contentious projects. And my position is that let us give ourselves time and carry out the required feasibility studies and designs for the management of water resources in the Republic of South Sudan. Thank you.
Thank you. I don't know if anybody have any reaction.
About dredging, okay, yeah. There's something Professor Khazin mentioned about water policies, water politics, draining, and the dredging of rivers. I think this one will be answered when we have our water resources master plan.
Yeah, the only thing that I want to add are a couple of alternatives to the Jonglei.
Can I ask a question to Dan second, and then you'll come? Just 1 second. There's one of the audience as well, Undersecretary, you can answer after Deng has finished, is the fact that we're already hearing that there are some equipment we do believe that are actually been brought in terms of dredging the Bahr Ghazal river. Is that the case? Is that true? Is that what is happening or not? So that's one. The second question would be, somebody said, Professor Al-Kazin stated that if we were to drain the Sud, there would be no rain in Equatoria. Do you agree with that point? So give those questions and then answer after you did.
Yes, I wanted to comment on some of the alternative to the Jonglei Canal. And as you pointed out, Honorable Lupai, you may have read my response to the VP, Taban Deng and Honorable Manawa. In that response, I hinted to these 3 proposals that I just want to highlight briefly here. So one is the artificial lake that I am proposing in the triangular area between the Upper Nile State, the Jonglei State, and Pigbo administrative area. Of course, this is a conceptual proposal that need to be preceded with a lot of studies. And Professor Al-Kazin and I have talked about it. For example, we will need to have a sample soil study. We will also have to study the issues of the gradient sloped and see whether we have depression there and whether we have enough catchments. And also what about the rainfall? Do we have the rainfall down there and the runoff? And where is the runoff going to and how much water and the direction it is going to? All of that are going to be part of the study. We also studied the capacity of it in terms of how it would provide water to livestock, human consumption, and to be able to do the lake water balance. That means the consumptions of the communities and the ecosystem around that will draw water from this lake, as well as the water that get into the lake from the runoff, from the rainfall, and also the evaporation rate that generate from this lake. So the water surface and the depth of the lake will then be determined in that research. And it could, or it doesn't have to be on the ground, it could be off the ground or under the ground. This is one proposal. The second proposal is that we have to renovate or to construct the Fuller Dam. And I think Brother Niall have talked at length about that a moment ago. So I won't go further on that. But it is one of the proposals that I have indicated that the Fuller Dam can modulate the flow of the Nile in addition to hydropower. Because in South Sudan, that's the only point where we have the velocity of the water. We're following the waterfall. And if we want to use any dam for hydropower, that seems to be one of the few areas we can capitalize on that. The last proposal that I have indicated to control the Bahar Kazal River system is that if the artificial lake in the triangle of Jonglei, Hapanal, and Pijbor administrative area, these are more of medium to long term initiative. Let's say it is successful, operational, then it can be replicated on the river Bahar Kazal system, where the Pango, the Juru, and the Lol River converge to form the Bahar Kazal system before it gets into the Bahar Kazal wetland. All of these are conceptual. They are also informed by my preliminary study in my D field, and I am now in consultation with Professor Touch and many others in the water resource area, including the environmentalists. I just wanted to point those out. Thank you.
Yeah, we seem to have lost the Undersecretary for now. I would yes, Professor Taj.
Right. I want to go straight into the question, do we need the Jonglei Canal? And I want to reverse the order to make it more logical. You start by what do you want, not by starting with the tool and then asking the question, do we really need it? So in our needs as a country, do we have a gap? And if there is a gap, we need to identify it, a gap of need. And then the answer will be the natural outcome, will be the raison d'etre, the reason why we do something. So I think we should not give too much weight to the lame canal as it is now, and we should ask ourselves what are our needs from preserving, increasing, protecting our water resources. Then if the answer comes out, including the canal, then it is credible. That's one. The second thing, one of the questions that Emmanuel asked was, what do we do with it? A very good question, actually, because the canal is there. People drowned. Last year, people drowned when it was filled. And now it has ruptured its northern part, and I am told that there are two ruptures, not only one. And we need to decide its viability for South Sudan. For me, Jonglei Canal is dead. When a person is dead, you bury them. And my advice is that the canal really needs to be buried once and for all, because for as long as it is out there, the Egyptians are going to nag and annoy and pressure the government of South Sudan. They will want it to be revived according to the design of siphoning. One last comment.
So bearing it, do you want it to be filled back?
Absolutely. Get 10 D9s
Fill it.
and get 20-25 cubic meters dump trucks, loaders, and bring enough soil to completely clear and make it flat. For as long as it is there, it will be an elephant in the room. For as long as it is there, it will be a colonial project. And I know the sacrifices that the people of South Sudan made, not only the SPLA, not only the SPLA. There were more people who died on the hands of the Sudanese army in cold blood than in combat. So a lot of blood was shed and spilled to have an independent country. You need to have your independence, and you need to have your integrity, and you need to have your say. My advice will be, let us completely wipe it out. A word of
Not to,
caution.
not to, not to, not to cut you short, Professor Tide. Let me just add something really quick on what you just said in terms of sacrifices. To your point.
Yeah.
So as we speak today, I think you and Professor Kate, who are a little bit senior to us, will remember that the
Open
1974
the door.
letter that Honorable Joshua Dow
I'm
wrote,
in a meeting.
and that letter highlighted the seriousness and the danger of the excavation of the canal. He
Yeah.
was not alone. He was also with Benjamin Bola Cook, an
Yeah.
MP from Awil. He
Yeah.
was also with a gentleman called uh, Stephen Church Lam, an MP from Law Nuer in Wad. And then he was also with Kellerman Muboro, an
Yeah.
MP from Wow, who later on became the chairman of Southern Front. These people, except Honorable Joshua Dow, have died. There were students, of course, and Professor Kate talked at length about that earlier on, that as a young man, he participated in those protests. And some of the students died. Today, Honorable Joshua Dow, who got me involved in this in 2021, and who actually organized the MPs in our last, in one of our presentations in Juba, he is actually a bridge, along with his colleague, between history in terms of the struggle for the Jonglei Canal and where we are today. And I thought it is important that we have the backdrop because a society that commemorates the past, cherish the present, and imagine the future has a chance of progression. You may carry on. I just wanted
Thank you.
to recognize that.
Thank you very much. Just one last
Just
point,
one last
and that's
point, and that's
international law.
international.
We are now an independent country, so we are not in the shadow of any other country or under the umbrella of any other country. We are standing alone, and we hope we stand tall. So we need to be careful about international law. In international law, there are two covenants that we must all be aware of. The first one is the Vienna Convention, 1978, ratified and entered into force the 6th of November, 1996. It is called the Vienna Convention. And it deals with what are the obligations of a country in case of secession from another country. This is our typical case. What are our rights? What are our obligations under the Nile agreements? There are 9 of them. So we need to be careful about that when we are talking. We don't stand alone. The other one, which is actually very relevant to a lot of the points that Emmanuel has alluded to, and that is the UN Convention on Non-Navigational Uses of International Waterways. This was, it became a convention in 1979. It was ratified and entered into force, I believe it was 2017. This is serious stuff. If you want to build a dam in Nimuli, in Fula, you just don't go ahead and build a dam. You cannot do that unless you want to have a confrontation with the African Union, with the African Development Bank, with the UN, with the World Bank, who will give you the money. So we have got to educate ourselves very well and probably put these two agreements as part of a curriculum at the University of Juba and be aware of the UN Convention on Non-Navigational Purposes of cross-border rivers, which is our case. We have got rivers that are coming from cross-border. And this is where I always advocate for Bahr al-Ghazal Basin. Bahr al-Ghazal Basin, all the rivers, Siu, Busari, Kit, all those rivers are actually originating in the plateau between Western Bahr al Ghazal and neighboring countries. So this is our water. We own it. We are a source country. We are not a conduit country or a user country. Thank you.
say something? Okay, can I comment? Do we need Jonglei Canal now?
Niall, I'll come to you in a bit. Let Professor message. Okay, thank you. Go ahead, Professor.
Okay, I'm saying, the question is, do we need it now? I say no. It's actually rubbing the wounds. It's dangerous. It's painful. It's playing with fire. It's contentious. Is to exacerbate conflict. We need peace. Jonglei Canal, any talk about it at this point is really dangerous. And so the window that it is a solution to the floods doesn't carry water. It's based on wrong assumptions, I said earlier. Assumption that there will be rains will come at this level every year. They might not. We may have extreme weather conditions. And what about the floods? And what we know about floods happen when you have downpour of rains. Those rains may be actually falling on that area, on Jonglei and United States, faster than the soil can absorb, to go down. So and also to be carried out. So the rivers are actually flooded and saturated. This is a science of flooding. So what the assumption that now you are coming to solve that problem, bringing up Jonglei Canal as a solution, I'm saying it is opportunistic, it is dangerous, it's based on wrong assumptions. For us, it's a wrong priority. You are actually considering the most difficult solution to the flooding issue. You have easier solutions there. The Undersecretary has said that actually communities have their own ways of, now we saw, of coping. We saw people actually cooking a stove over the water. Go to Berlin, go to Germany, go to UK. We have seen such things. Cars, being carried on the streets. The extreme flooding is also, a global phenomenon where you have, droughts, extreme droughts, where you have, very heavy rains over a very short time, and they're everywhere in England. In of course, you look at Philippines and so on. Now, Philippines is really a flood prone area. You get volcanoes, you get tsunamis, but they haven't left. They found actual ways to cope with. Now, if you think that the solution is to give water to Egypt so that you sleep in peace, I think that is misguided. So, in short, we don't need it now. It's rubbing the wound. It's actually not solving. It actually exacerbate conflict. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Niall.
Thank you, Mr. Niall.
Niall, can you hear us?
Niall, can you hear us?
Yes.
Yes. Yeah. Go ahead. The platform is yours. We can hear you.
We can hear you. Yeah.
Good.
Can you hear us, Niall?
Can you hear us?
You need to
Yes. Yeah.
Good.
You are muted. I think he's muted.
You are muted. I think he's muted.
Good. Okay, thank you very much.
Okay.
So, do we need the canal now? Yeah, my answer, of course, is it's a big no. And what do we do with it? Yes, I agree with Professor Taj. that when something is dead, it is buried. But I would like to add that we should also make it a memorial site for tourist attraction. Once it is buried, we plant trees and we make it, because it's a historical place now, will be, for many things. So, and I am relating this because Jonglei Canal is not the only canal in the world that has been stopped from reaching its destination. As you can remember, the Cross Florida Batch Canal, which was intended like centuries ago to connect, the Atlantic Ocean with the Pacific Ocean. To cross Florida, as you know, the map of Florida in the U.S., going around Florida was, a nightmare, and it's still a nightmare. But so they thought they should do the canal, and so the canal was dug halfway, of course, and it was eventually stopped through a presidential order. So I would like to add that the president should basically, because he was the operational, the chief of staff basically, or one of the leaders. The security chief by the time the SPLM was able to stop this. Why can't the president issue an executive order to once and for all, put an end to this Jonglei Canal thing, and remediate the area that has already been dug, maybe studied, and that's what I agree with Undersecretary Emmanuel, studying how to actually dispose it of and remedy the area that has been dug in a safe way, and of course, like what I said, creating a memorial site for it where tourists from different parts of the world can come, like the Cross Florida Batch Canal, which has now been turned into so many things, like skiing site and tourist camping areas, camping grounds, trailing ground, and all those things. We could do something like that, of course. The other thing is that it's obvious that it's an Egyptian interest, it's not a South Sudanese interest. And the analogy that I usually use is that if the South Sudanese interest was a cow and the Egyptian interest was a horse, a cow will give birth to a cow. So if you are taking an Egyptian interest, which is a horse, and you want to turn it into a South Sudanese interest, how can you turn a horse into a cow? And our interest is a cow. So it's impossible. So let us just, leave it there. But of course, we have so many options. I have already talked about the option of, building a dam upstream. And of course, when we talk about these issues, they should be studied very well. It doesn't mean that we go and start right away and dig in the dam. But previous studies actually have shown the potential, and that's where we are pointing. What we are saying is evidence-based, which means that previous studies are showing that Nimili is a potential site for a storage dam. We can still be studied, of course. The backwater can go all the way to Uganda and can affect the Ugandan ecosystem. It can also bring in some diplomatic issues between the two countries. Of course, we need to cooperate start talking with Uganda. If we were to go to that direction, of course, you need to, involve both countries in engaging in such, which is actually in the spirit of the Nile Basin Initiative, which is basically anchored on equitable use of the Nile water, cooperation between the countries, and all those. And so the other option, of course, apart from the dams, is that our people have been using dikes since time immemorial, and I think it's one of the options that has been underutilized. Yes, in the two counties, actually in Jonglei State, in Bor and in Twitch East, after the CPA was signed in 2005, a very good modern dike was built as part of, allowing the displaced person from that area to come back, because that area was already affected by flooding. And a good dike was built from Jalipayam all the way to Twitch East, 90 kilometers down. So something similar can also be, this dike now has been weakened because of many years of lack of maintenance and repair. And so the the flooding of the last 3 years has basically affected it has overwhelmed the dike that is already existing, and so this dike should be strengthened and expanded to other counties, to Ayut, to Pangak, to Fiji. Is one. So in the eastern part of the Bahr Jabal, and also in the western part, we also need to do similar one. In the Barghazal river system, we need also to propose the same one. But when I'm saying this, also we need to study, and such dikes should be well set back from the ecosystem, especially from the wetlands, up to maybe 5 kilometers to 10 kilometers or 20 kilometers from the wetlands, so that you give enough room, because it's enough room for the river is now becoming a best practice, which is being borrowed from the Netherlands. And so also some of the communities are actually living close to the rivers now because of conflict. Communities are coming closer, especially communities in the Sud wetland. They have moved in the last 40 years of conflict. People have moved from their original areas to closer to the Sud wetlands. And so it's another factor that is affecting them. So government also should provide security so that people can also move back upland and to leave enough room for the river to expand during the years of flooding like this. And so all this should also be done and should also be studied, like this first stage, which is supposed to be what is supposed to be done, is to actually gather evidence. Then we should gather evidence on building a storage dam for flood protection and for hydroelectricity, dikes for protecting the communities, and also the option of the dredging also should be studied. I was in Bentiu in March this year. I landed at the airport, and the airstrip that was surrounded by water, and I look at the Barghazal River, which passes around Bentiu. The water was standing still; it's not flowing, and it's not flowing partly because also the river is also silted and the flood there. And so what we should also talk about when we talk about dredging, we should talk about it within the context of rehabilitating it to the original state, not to dig it deeper or not to actually change the natural course of the river. Because when we are talking about the dredging, maybe people take it out of context sometimes, but we are removing the vegetation that has basically blocked the water channel. The water hyacinth, which has grown for many years in the Nile Basin, is basically affecting the navigation. Is also affecting the volume, the water the river capacity, basically to be able to contain too much water, like the kind of water that we have seen in the last 3 years. And so this is basically my position: is that Jonglei Canal, we don't need it, but we need actually to manage the water in a way that will meet our interests as South Sudanese. And so if the studies that are being proposed by the ministry are to be done, then they should be on the best way, what is the best way to manage our water in a way that is sustainable, in a way that is safe for the interest of South Sudan, for irrigation interests, for domestic consumption, for electricity, and for flood protection, and so on and so forth. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Mr. Nyal, for that, and for all of our expert and panelists in the studio here. I have the Undersecretary here with me. I put him on speaker on my phone, because basically the internet on his side can't allow him. So we have connected on WhatsApp. So I think, I don't know if we'll be able to hear him. I'll try it if he can talk on speaker, so that our viewers and yourself in the studio can hear, to respond to the two questions that we asked earlier. The other question, Undersecretary, that I would like to add before you answer the other question, is that one of the audience asked that some of the people in the Great Upper Nile do consider that Jonglei Canal will be a solution to the problem of flooding. What do you tell them? So that as well, I'll throw that question as well to you, the panelists in the studio. what do you tell people who believe that Jonglei Canal is the solution to what they believe is detrimental to their livelihood? So to you, Undersecretary, if they can hear you, answer the questions, and then from there we can wrap it up. Thank you.
By answering the last question,
is he clear? Just 1 second. Is he clear? Good. Okay. Yes.
You can unmute yourself, Nyathon. You
and
can
I
unmute
believe
yourself.
that the
Okay.
Jonglei Canal is...
Yeah, Undersecretary, can you start? Yeah, they can hear you now. Yeah, start all over. Yeah. Thank you.
Yes. Yes. Okay, I'll start all over again. I will answer by saying that I wish it were true that the Jonglei Canal is a solution to flooding in the country. Because right now we know very well, but with that scientific evidence, that the backup from Jebel Aulia Dam has reached Reng and even parts of Fallujah. So whether you dig and dissect the Jonglei Canal or you don't, still water is going to stay in the Republic of South Sudan. These are my fears. So I don't think digging and dredging of Jonglei Canal is a solution to answer the issue of flooding in Upper Nile. Instead, the alternative solution would be to create this artificial lake proposed by the PhD candidate, Dr. Neil, and Dr. Deng. Deng Majok, yes, that we need to create artificial lakes. And we've been proposed this one. We have requested for equipment so that at least here and there we'll be able to create these artificial lakes with the sole aim and purpose of keeping our water below the surface of the land. Now coming to the next question about the equipment which is coming to Bentiu for dredging of the river. Yes, this equipment is coming. Yesterday and even today, I've written a letter for the drivers to leave, to be given visas, to be able to transport this equipment to Bentiu in Unity State before the flooding closes these roads. But these equipment are still in the process of assembly. It will take time before we start using them. It's coming for use by the people of the Republic of South Sudan. But before we start the dredging exercise, we have agreed by one of the international organizations called IOM. They have secured funding to enable us to conduct the feasibility studies and design how this stretch of the Bahar Jebel is going to be dredged from there up to some kilometers before Lake No. If there's somebody saying that the dredging should not be done too deep, I wish we could go even deeper than that so that our rivers become the vessels that contain our water in absence of a dam, But also this remains as my wishful thinking because we need to have it documented through a feasibility study. About the issue of no rain in
before you go, Emmanuel, before you go, from where is the equipment coming? From where is this equipment coming?
Where are the equipment coming from?
From where is it coming?
They're coming from Egypt.
They're coming from Egypt.
Okay.
Yes.
We have a joint technical agreement which was signed in 2006. The memorandum of understanding was signed in 2006. Then in 2008 we have the joint technical agreement which was signed, and it allows implementation of projects such as Hafirs, which were dug in Tonj area, in Kapota area, and there are a few others which are most likely to be constructed in Nirol and Uror, including dredging of Bahar section of Bahar Ghazal. In their proposal, they had wanted to do the dredging without any feasibility study, but we said no, minus a feasibility study. Our water law, our water policy says that any project of significant magnitude should be implemented without conducting environmental and social impact assessment. So the good news is that we have secured this funding from through IOM. Recently, the World Bank has given us a grant of $120 million. So I don't know whether that is part of that project or it's not, but I think the $120 million project starts in July, in June, July. But IOM has secured this funding, and therefore they are going to start commissioning a feasibility study for the possible dredging of the section of Bahar Ghazal from Bentiu up to Lake No. It's about 30 kilometers.
And is this equipment part of the $26.2 million that Egypt has agreed with you under the technical agreement? Is it part of the $26.4 million, the cost of the equipment?
Yes. Yes, it's part of it. And actually, for this equipment, the project allocated for the dredging of this section of Bahar Al Ghazal is $4.5 million US.
4.5 million.
Minus feasibility study. So we said no dredging will take place unless we carry out a feasibility study. So therefore, we have secured the funding. We are now writing the terms of reference for a consultant to be procured in order to do this exercise.
Just let me intervene there. We know that dredging has been going on since around 2008, as far as I can remember. And I have a friend of mine who worked with the, he now works with the Ministry of Finance. So dredging, before we understood it, has been going on. And so where is this feasibility study? And the dredging is going on anyway. It's something that you can, you can, let us know. This is what we know about that. So where is that? It doesn't make sense now. What is different now? Because the dredging is already happening.
Yeah, the other question that you should also add is...
Professor Cage, probably the difference is also in the administration. When this dredging was carried out, the first dredging which took place was happening in Western Bahar Ghazal. Some tributaries and the rivers which are joining River Jur were dredged, and the outcome of that dredging was detrimental because of the slope. A uniform gradient without making provision for creation of pools and the ponds to contain water. When the dredging was accomplished, communities living in that area complained of the ponds which they used to water gardens along those streams had already dried up. Water comes and flows just straight without any without any ponds holding them. So this is something, as I said, is an approach that here I would like to ensure that we follow our water policy. Our water policy says that we need to have environmental and social impact assessments conducted and then presented to competent agencies. We're not going to involve in this project alone. We're going to work together with our land ministries, Ministry of Agriculture, Ministry of Livestock and Fisheries, as well as Ministry of Environment and Forestry. We're going to be working together as a formidable government agency in order to protect the resources of this country.
But as civil society, Emmanuel, as civil society, as concerned civil society, I am making a plea that the equipment, when it arrives, it needs to be quarantined. It needs to be stored. It should not move. It should not have a single drop of fuel pumped into it until your credible, impartial, evidence-based study is completed and we come with the result that the equipment can actually do good. But until that time...
Your point is noted.
Thank you very much. Very kind.
Yeah, I also want to add, Honorable Lupai, that the capability of individual staff of your ministry and the other ministries that you have alluded to join you in this. Have you trained enough staff to operate this machine to be the one doing the dredging when the social environmental impact assessment is done, and let's say the dredging has been approved? Do you have staff, South Sudanese staff, in your ministry that will operate this machine?
Okay, any other questions before the Undersecretary respond from our panels? Okay.
Yeah, thank you very much. So my question, Undersecretary Emmanuel, Thank you very much for being transparent. This idea of the dredging machines arriving in Bintio has been making the round on the internet, and it has been treated as a rumor. So now you have cleared the air, and it's good. It's reassuring that the feasibility studies and environmental and social impact assessment are going to be done. So my question is, we know that in this country we have competent, line ministries like the Ministry of Environment. So, is the feasibility studies, the environmental and social impact assessment, are they going to be managed directly by the ministry? I know the Ministry of Environment is supposed to do a number of steps for environmental and social impact assessment, and that is starting with the screening, coming to scoping. Scoping is where we determine which areas the study should focus on, who should be involved in terms of stakeholders, communities, technical experts, civil society, women group, and all those. And what I know is that in this country, some ministries, and I know your ministry has always been involved. I was part of the Juba Rumbek Road Review Committee that reviewed that road after it was wiped out by the water in May 2020, and I was with one of your staff members, a very competent gentleman. And what we basically discovered is that, like, these line ministries were completely not involved in the feasibility studies and the ESIA that was carried out by the Shandong company. And it was one of the weaknesses in the information was completely not there, leading to underestimation of some of the river, the stream basins, like starting here with Luri and some other smaller streams. What I'm trying to underscore here is that it's very important to really be able to follow the steps and allow the competent institution mandated by the law to be the one to take charge. Because with the case of the Juba Rumbek Road, I think we should have enough of such cases where the institutions that are competent are always ignored, such as your ministry, Ministry of Environment, Ministry of Wildlife, Ministry of Agriculture, Ministry of Livestock and Fisheries, and civil society and academic institution. All these are ignored, but they hold the key to the success of such projects. So mine is a comment, but it's also a question, so that we avoid the mistakes which we have always been committing, which is writing always with a project for us later to actually regret. Thank you very much.
And also, Emmanuel, if you could tell us what that equipment is it drag line? Is it Caterpillars D8s, D9s? Is it only excavation equipment? If you have drag line and you want to dredge, you will need pontoons. Are the pontoons coming as well? The draft of the River Transport Corporation has always been 4 feet. So if there are pontoons coming to carry the drag line to excavate, if you could enlighten us a little bit more about the composition of this equipment, this has a lot of bearing of what the ultimate intentions are. Thank you.
All right, guys. To all of you, I have a bit of emergency. I need to end the call. One of my child fell, so.
Oh,
or if Aisha, if somebody can maybe continue to, or we could end and then come back for our next session. The Honorable, if we could answer quickly. I'm just going to go off a little bit and
Sure.
just 2 minutes and then I'll be back.
Sure. We hope all goes well.
Thank you.
Sure.
Thank you. Okay. So actually I need the phone.
For your submission.
So I need the phone as well. So I'm going to, Niall, can you please take over just quickly, if that's okay? I need to head off. Is that okay? Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, take care.
Yeah, just 1 second. Yeah. There, Barker, what happened? Just 1 second. Okay. All right. Yeah. So I don't know. I need to call 911. So I need to go. If somebody can take over.
Yeah, alternatively, you can just end and we
Okay.
can reschedule next time, seeing it is an emergency situation to do with a child.
Yes.
Yeah.
So I think to all our viewers, I apologize, and to all the experts in our studio, thank you so much. As we said, we have another session organized. The one that is coming is for the women expert as well in the Nile water and the Sud area, and then the next one as well will bring up back the experts to come and complete this session. I apologize. This is our background as women. We are presenting at the same time as well. We have to take care of our children.
Sure.
So I thank you all for the
Thank
session.
you very much.
Okay. All right.
Take
And
care.
thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Okay. Bye.
Okay. Bye.